Okay, my previous video looked at political attitudes, and if you remember, political attitudes were very based on context. And you really couldn't get at the idea of what someone's actual ideology was, according to their political attitude. You remember, you could be a radical in China, for example, and in terms of what you believed about how society should really be structured, what the best form of government was, and that kind of thing, it's going to look different versus if you're in Europe. So, but when we want to compare those sort of things, this is when we look at political ideologies. So if we say, okay, if I'm a communist in the United States or a communist in Europe or a communist in China, I share similar ideas about what society ought to look like, the best form of government, that kind of thing. And so we find commonality there. And so the attitude may have been different. The ideology is going to be the same if we're all communists. I'm not communist, just FYI. So, um, and okay, I'm going to read something real quick here. It says, political attitudes are concerned with the speed of political change and the methods used to achieve it. Political ideology comprises the basic values an individual holds about the fundamental goals of politics regarding freedom and equality. Remembering that sort of prime goals that everyone is concerned with politically involve either pursuing freedom in some fashion or equality. Sometimes those two goals can be in conflict. Sometimes they can work together to an extent, but a lot of what we'll see with these ideologies has to do with where you put your emphasis in terms of freedom or equality. Okay, and so political attitudes focus on the specific context of political change in a given country. By contrast, political ideologies are more universal since they assume there is one ideal way to balance freedom and equality. So what I will do now is look and explore 5 different political ideologies and what they all emphasize. And I am going to attach a chart in along with this assignment that will hopefully kind of clarify how these different ideologies look relative to each other. So first up, communism. All right, well, communism rejects that personal freedom equates to prosperity for the majority. The big major goal for communism is equality, not freedom. And so, in order to achieve that goal, to really make sure that everyone is equal, this is going to require a high capacity and high autonomy state. And a communist system would advocate state control to avoid exploitation of the population. And what that means is it is trying to avoid exploitation on the part of like the bourgeoisie, which were sort of the wealthy, the ones who own factories and land and these kind of things, who can therefore supposedly exploit those at the bottom, which in communism are called the proletariat. So uh, this goal of communism, therefore, is hey, we need to protect the people from exploitation at the hands of the bourgeoisie, who are would be those like factory owners and such. So we just need to seize ownership of everything, and then that way, the people, the ones we support, as if you look here, that symbol for communism is a hammer and sickle. And we're really used to just kind of looking at, to me, just like a symbol. You don't really think about what the contents of it actually are. And so it can look kind of like this intimidating, foreboding symbol. But what it's supposed to represent is the worker, right? The hammer representing an industrial worker, and the sickle, which is like a field worker. So communism supposedly is looking out for their interests. And the way of doing that is by making sure it controls everything and can therefore ensure equality for all. Okay, next ideology is called social democracy. And social democracy pretty much falls right in the middle. It is looking to balance goals of freedom and equality. And therefore, they're okay with some degree of private ownerships and a market because they say, yeah, we want to give some freedom of, commerce and that kind of thing, but with an emphasis on equality. Meaning, if it looks like some people are getting inordinately wealthy from their perspective, we want to kind of balance that and bring in some degree of equality. And this would require high capacity and autonomy to ensure equality, because they do have that as a goal, but maybe not as extreme as you'd find in communism. So you do find these sorts of protections like job protection, medical care, education, retirement, etc. Pretty much, yeah, most democracies today do have elements of this, and it just has to do with the extent. So you would have things like unemployment insurance in most places, but maybe a difference between a place we more consider a social democracy like the UK versus the United States is the UK has a national health service and nationalized healthcare. The United States, so yeah, so there are limitations on freedom through taxation, various regulations. I should say regulations. I guess I didn't catch that typo. Okay, so then we got this image of bureaucracy, and what I would see here is the top left, what my friends think I do, basically working in some way that's outdated, doesn't work very well. My parents, that they, just shuffling all these papers, overloaded by it, working real hard. And then the public, this is an expression that in the US at least, when you view bureaucracy very negatively, that's like, oh, there's just all these barriers that you have to do to get through and hoops to jump through. We call it red tape, and it's like when things are just unnecessarily difficult, it means you have to go through a lot of red tape. And yeah, then these others aren't so important. But what I actually do, a lot of meetings. So trying to work things out, try to make your system better. Hopefully you get there, maybe you don't. Okay, next system is fascism. And when you call someone fascist today, it just kind of has this idea of someone that is very kind of authoritarian, that they just want to force their way of doing things on others. And in terms of how this came about, there is a bit of that, but there is a more specific ideological sense to what fascism is. So fascism, like it says there, it's hostile to individual freedom and rejects equality. People can be classified by superiority, and it is unembarrassed about the idea that its people group that it represents is on top. So this is kind of where we looked at nationalism before. Fascism involves hyper-nationalism, requires high capacity and autonomy state. Notice it's the state is over society. The state expresses the national will. So what this means is what's really important isn't the individual, but it's the advancement of the state. And there's an image there of Benito Mussolini, who introduced fascism in Italy. That is kind of the earliest fascism. We now use it otherwise, but it is an Italian word that he brought along. And his quote here is, "We declare war against socialism." So it wasn't, socialism or normally, by the way, we can pretty much say socialism and communism as being equal to each other. But later on, we will see how they can have some distinctions. But in any case, we declare war against socialism not because it is socialism, but because it has opposed nationalism. We intend to be an active minority, attract the proletariat away from the official Socialist Party. But if the middle class thinks that we're going to be their lightning rods, they are mistaken. So he's saying, no, we're all about the national will, the pride of the nation, and um, socialism is internationalist. It believes that you should support the worker everywhere to spread that revolution all over the world. Fascism, however, is ultra-nationalist. So therefore, it would obviously oppose communism or socialism. By the way, I clicked past this too quickly. Fascism would be low freedom, low equality. So those just aren't goals. It's not concerned with the people at all. It's concerned with how well the state does. Okay, next we have anarchism. Now, anarchism, obviously, we know about the word anarchy. We usually just kind of use it to mean chaos. But there is a more particular political idea for someone who is actually a professed anarchist as their ideology. And if you remember the word monarchy, monarchy is a system where you have one person at the top, right? Monarchy. Anarchy means there's no one at the top. And so anarchists reject the state So they just say we should just get rid of the state because the state is a threat to freedom and equality. And so in that sense, they are like liberals because liberals believe that the state, yeah, that the state should be restrained. I haven't talked about liberals yet. I saved that for the end because of a couple particular reasons. But so yeah, anarchists don't, they just don't want a state at all. Liberals believe there should be a state, but that it should be restrained. Anarchists also don't like private property. They think private property leads to inequality. And in that, they're in agreement with communists. So from their perspective, they say, hey, people, if you just get rid of government, they'll be free to operate as true equals. So in terms of its pursuit, what it wants to achieve, it's actually high equality, high freedom. So it's kind of idealist. It sounds great, right? High freedom, high equality, but obviously in practice, anarchy just doesn't work. But yeah, so there would be kind of an anarchist creed for a world without capitalism, for a society without states. So just wanting to eliminate all that, eliminate national borders, and you can have this sort of utopia where everybody just gets along. All right, finally, liberalism. And I saved this to the end, even though it is probably the one we're kind of most familiar with, but maybe not under this word. And the reason I saved this is because the word liberalism is actually one that's very malleable, meaning it changes quite a bit depending on the context we're using it in. So, for example, in the United States, if you talk about someone being a liberal, normally it means that they are a Democrat. But in the context of a political ideology that we're looking at here, liberalism involves those who put a high priority on individual freedom. If you think about the word liberar in Spanish, or to liberate, it involves freedom, right? And so these people who are liberals in this sense, whose ideology is liberalism, their main goal is high freedom. They don't really care about equality. And the reason is they say, hey, everyone should be able to pursue their own opportunity and whatever results, results. So they want a state that has low capacity and autonomy because they want to be able to restrain and even control the state. Um, they recognize that, yes, you will have greater economic inequality, but overall, you have the greatest prosperity for the majority. If you just let people pursue their opportunity, then it will work out best for everyone. You won't have a very equal society in terms of material equality, but it will be best for everyone. So I want to end here with looking at this image, this chart, which I will also post as a picture that you can look at separately. And this illustrates how these different political ideologies fall relative to each other. And let's read that out. Liberals and anarchists favor decentralized power and weaker or non-existent states, as well as high levels of individual freedom. Communists and fascists favor the concentration of state power at the expense of individual freedom. Social democrats prefer a balance between state power and individual freedom. So we see this reflected here, right? Anarchism up in the top left, with high equality, high freedom. Liberalism, low equality, high freedom. Fascism, low equality, low freedom. Communism, high equality, low freedom. And then finally, social democracy, kind of right in the middle, hoping to try to balance all these goals. Now, that to say, just because social democracy is right in the middle doesn't, we can't just say it's definitely the best of all worlds, right? Because it's, all of these systems are going to have their problems. So, yeah, you could make an argument for the different ones, but yeah, that's going to be saved for a later time. And I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all soon.